Hello and welcome to episode 6 of This Is Not a Book Club. Do you want to introduce our brand new...
Is it 6 or 7? By the way?
6.
6? Okay, wow.
Our sponsor.
Yes, we are.
We're not, but we're going to pretend like... I'm going to take a sip just to show how amazing this is. Prime.
Yeah.
So Prime went after Arsenal, then they went after Barcelona, and now they have knocked on the door of the esteemed This Is Not a Book Club podcast. So we are here. We're not, just to be clear. But yeah,
well, we could be.
We could be. And we didn't pay for these, by the way. These were on the house from James, our producer.
Yeah.
Do you want to crack on with the podcast? We've done enough brand endorsement for Prime.
Yeah, no, I think that was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, now we're ready for...
I have a question for you.
Yes?
I told you I was going to ask you a question. So you messaged me a couple of days ago.
I can see where this is going.
So obviously, like episode 4,
yes,
I think we talked about David Goggins and, the marathon and all of that. Let's not go into all of that.
One of us had done a marathon,
One
basically.
hasn't, obviously. So you said that you were going to go for a run, and you were like, you sent me a voice note saying, I was going to go for a run, but it started raining. So, what do I do?
Yeah.
And then I sent you a David Goggins video in response.
Yeah.
Did you go for that run?
Yeah, I did.
How was it?
Oh, amazing. That video, basically, for the viewers, what the video was. Like, I'm telling him I'm basically asking for an advice because I'm preparing for a 10K race now. Not a marathon, but we got to try.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So I asked him... some advice in running. I'm thinking where to go. Give me a route, or like, should I wear something differently? You send me this video in which it says David Goggins like, you want to run? The weather's not good. So you just broke your leg. So
and did you run?
I ran. Yeah, actually, I wanted to do 10K. I did 11 and a half just to
for Goggins.
Yeah, for Goggins, for your sake,
for my sake,
Salim Goggins.
But yeah,
no, that was an interesting. I actually wanted to really thank you and say that made a huge difference, because I was thinking, how can you go from that, not just motivation, but to actually get things doing? I was like, had I listened to a book on my own without having the podcast, I don't think I'll be running right now. But because afterwards you pushed me to sign up for that 10K run, now I feel like, okay, I have to do that. So I've been actually running quite regularly, which for me, that's an interesting thing. Sometimes when there's like, we commit to something, that's really helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I actually...
I'm here anytime.
This one, I really thank you for that. It's been really fun.
No, I think generally when it comes to these kind of things, you're right. When you set a target and you have something to work towards, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
So like, I haven't run a long distance since the marathon. I did a half marathon, and after that I've run maximum like 10K. Just because there's nothing to work towards. So I'm like, whatever. But it's when you find yourself like, okay, I've got to achieve this, then you naturally work towards it.
Yeah. And I think sorry, I caught you. Go on.
No, I was done.
No, and I was gonna say, sometimes it's really helpful for someone who finds it a little bit, they're more familiar with that world, to give you that push. That's why hopefully maybe more interesting things will come about that, but I don't want to reveal too much.
We have, to be fair, we have a lot of plans for the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping I told you, right? Like we'll launch and we'll start with basic branding and whatever else, and then 6 months in, which is where we're at now, we can start stepping. I mean, Prime is in the picture, so we can really start having some fun with it, and we've had so many ideas, which we're hoping to start implementing. Yeah. So only good things to come. So yeah, I think let's crack on with this episode. Yeah. So the book this week is Solve for Happy by Mo Gawdat / Gawdat. Can you as the authority on names, how do we pronounce it? How do the Dutch pronounce it?
That's a very good question. I would go with Mo Gawdat for this episode. Gawdat. Yes.
All right, we'll go with Gawdat, and then we can be corrected.
And I hope if we're wrong, it will be corrected. We mean no offense.
So a really quick bio. Mo Gawdat is an author, entrepreneur, and former chief business officer of Google X. Born in Egypt, he developed a passion for mathematics and technology. With a bachelor's degree in computer science and management, Gawdat held influential positions at IBM and Microsoft before joining Google X. However, a personal tragedy led him on a quest to understand happiness, resulting in his best-selling book, Solve for Happy, Engineer Your Path to Joy. Gawdat's unique blend of scientific reasoning, practical insights, and compassionate storytelling has made him a sought-after speaker and advisor on happiness and well-being. His mission is to spread happiness and help individuals unlock their full potential by embracing a positive outlook and strategies for sustainable happiness.
That was good. No, that was
tiring.
Good. You tried.
You know, like
really
my breathing
hard.
goes all messed up when I read.
So.
All right. So this book, what did you think? I mean, okay. As always, can you summarize it in like a sentence or two?
So Mo Gawdat, as a former chief business officer of Google X, an engineer-minded person, a mathematically minded person, says, I wanted to figure out a formula for happiness. So the book is basically an effort of an engineer to give a formula for happiness tested in his own life. So that was more than one sentence.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
I really liked it overall.
Yeah.
I think maybe we start with like the central hypothesis that he puts out, or the equation that he puts together.
Yeah.
He basically says that everything is about your happiness, and everything is essentially about experience versus expectations. If your expectations, or if your experience exceeds your expectations or is the same as your expectations, then you will be happy or content. If your experience is below your expectations, then you'll be unhappy. And I think when I read that and you break it down that simply, it makes sense. Because I think everything comes down to expectations. So in any kind of social interaction, for example, you expect a certain level of respect from people. If you don't get that, you would be unhappy. Just like when you go to a restaurant and you expect a certain level of service or whatever, when you don't get that, you complain, you kick up a fuss, you say, oh, that server was rude or whatever else. If your food comes late because you expected it in 20 minutes, but it takes 30 minutes, it's all based on expectations. So I think from there, he goes on to kind of discuss very deeply in many different ways where our expectations come from, who has the expectations, the mind, feelings, all of these things. But yeah, just in terms of like the first central hypothesis, your thoughts?
So yeah, I think that is actually the basis of the book, that happiness is not something that you should gain like later on in your life. It's a birthright. Every person should be happy. This is one of the things he says. And he says that the reason we're not happy is not external events. As you said, it's our expectation of what life should look like. And so he says, instead of trying to gain our happiness later on, like I'll achieve this degree or this job to at some point be happy, you need to solve your life for happy right now. Which reminds me of that. I don't know if you saw a few years ago, this became quite like viral on Instagram, that they asked like a child, what do you want to be when you're older? And then she said happy. And that's an answer that was surprising for everyone. But he says that's what every person should say. We always think that I need to be this, I want to be that, which means that, for example, if I say I want to be like, I don't know, a famous author or whatever, it says you are solving your life for being an author. But instead, solve your life for happy. Like make that as your primary goal, and then you'll see that it's attainable. It's everyone can get it, but you need to let go of your expectations and some delusions, basically.
He also said something interesting where he gave the example of like a refugee camp, and he said they'll be interviewing adults, for example, who have lost their homes, who have had to flee due to war or whatever else, and they'll always be miserable. And then he goes, the camera will always pan, or like often in the background, you'll see children who are playing blissfully happy. And he makes the point that unhappiness is basically, or happiness is the absence of unhappiness. Our default state is to be happy. So he talks a lot about childhood and children, and how children are just in a state of bliss and joy, and everything is good in the world. But then it's only the external factors, and as like society and things pile on, we start to find ourselves discontent and unhappy. And it's the absence essentially of unhappiness that leads to happiness.
Yeah. So I think the point he was trying to make here is that the idea that by gaining certain things that culture tells us to gain more of, we'll be happy, we won't be. Children come into this world happy, and it seems like we program them out of happiness by the time they're an adult. And that's actually one of the points I really like in some of my workshops as well. I mention it, that most adults are really grumpy. Like even the ones who've reached their dreams or what, it's very rare to come across an adult that really smiles and all of that. And Mo doesn't shy away. I hope it's okay to call him Mo. Sir Gawdat does not.
Sir Gawdat.
Does not shy away from the fact that he says that's who I was. And I really find that part, because someone may say, why should I listen to another book on happiness, like as if I haven't read enough of this? Or I think he, as an engineer, he's got that mentality that if I'm giving you a product, I need to show proof for it, proof of concept, right? And he says this formula has been tested on my own life in a very difficult situation. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I started reading it, because you told me that he touches upon this issue. We'll come down to, although you did mention it in the bio. So he says he comes from, like, he migrates from Egypt and reaches all of his dreams. He goes really successful in the tech world. He worked in Microsoft, then becomes chief business officer of Google X. By 29, he's at top of the world, basically, of his own world. And he said, I had everything. Villa with swimming pool, all the cars. Could I make money any day I wanted? And he's got all of this, but he says, I'm not happy. And I think he mentioned that beautiful memory, which was like his wake-up call. So money, wife, children, everything is great. But he says, I'm still working, always busy, doing busy people thing. And he says, one morning, my little daughter, 5 years old at the time, wanted to go out, was excited to have ice cream. And I told her, come on, be serious for a minute or something like that. And he says, I just caught myself asking my 5-year-old, you need to be serious. I said, okay, something's going wrong. And so at that point, I realized I'm really not enjoying life. And he sets out to find a way to be happy. And it's not easy. So I think the reason I think I got interested in the book is that this is not another person just writing about happiness. This was a person who tried to solve his own thing. Yeah. These are precious people.
And I think more than anything, it's he. I think he develops this framework or formula before his son passes away, and then he talks about it in the book. And I think in chapter 1, so we both listened to the book, so you'll hear a very distinct difference in his voice. In the first half of that chapter to when he starts talking about his son Ali's passing away. So his son died when he was 21 it was a routine, I think, appendix operation.
Yeah, I don't remember, but it was a very routine operation.
It was a routine operation, and
there were 5 mistakes in a row.
Yeah, and they basically punctured something. He internally bled, and he passed away. But I think what's also incredible, and this is more personal than like the general philosophy of the book, is the way that he talks about his son. And his son's like wisdom, and he said that they would go to Ali for advice. And he was like the sage of the family.
That's beautiful.
Really, really beautiful.
And it comes across like you're listening and you feel it, I really felt
it. But that's the beauty, I think, because he's reading the book himself. And you can hear that he's like, I think he's audibly kind of shaking as he gets closer to describing what happens to his son. It's really quite moving, and I think it lays the foundation, because he's being so open and so bare with his story. You're willing to give it time.
Exactly.
Because, as you say, there are other books where it's like, okay, here's a philosophy of life. But like, there's no proof. Who said it works?
So that's actually one of the reasons that I kept listening. Initially, it was a little bit difficult for me to listen, because it comes across as like, finally, I'm going to share with you something that no one got it, but because I'm so smart.
And especially from like a Google exec.
I think these are, I hope these are the things editors added. It's like a lot of this that No one got it, but it's all because these humanities people don't get it now, and engineers come to solve it for you all. That was really difficult for me to push through, but I felt like this guy has something genuine. I was like, let me listen, and I'm so glad I listened. I pushed through, and so basically, he's 29-year-old, very rich, not happy. He sets on to figure out how to be happy. He starts researching everything, and in the meantime, his son is growing. So he starts talking to his son, etc., and then his son dies. And he says, for me, that was the test if my formula works or not. And he realizes that, no, it did work. And he says, of course, I was sad that I've lost my son. And you can imagine how angry one would be if you lose your son to like mistake of a doctor. But he says, I realized that resentment is not going to bring my son back. I can choose either to cherish his memory and be happy or be unhappy. And he said, I chose to be happy. And then so this is basically, I think, the foundation he builds the book on top of that.
And I was going to say, even practically, in light of his son's death, this book, for example, wouldn't have happened without that. And he embraces the fact that his son's death could have been an accident and could have been in vain, and that was the end of it. But he's decided to make something of it, and for everything that's come from it. So I think initially, after his son passed away, friends and family decided to support a water project, and you know, hundreds of people have had clean drinking water as a result of his son's death. Then obviously the legacy of this book and how many people that it's impacted and changed, and all of his speaking and everything else, he's really taken something that could be a life-defining tragedy that kind of almost cuts an entire family's journey short.
And it does, and it really does.
And it does. And you know, you can see, and we know examples even personally of how trauma can cripple entire like generations, entire villages almost, but he's made it a source of strength. Which is beautiful. And there was one example actually that really struck me that he gave, where he spoke about this Saab car that he had that he really loved. And he goes, one of the happiest days of my life was the day that car was written off. And he goes, why? Because my wife was driving it and she got into a head-on collision. And he goes, I was so grateful that she walked away from that without a scratch. The car was written off, but the airbags worked correctly. Everything, all the safety measures worked out. So he goes, there's two ways of looking at it. He goes, had that car been parked and had someone hit it head on and it had been destroyed, the same outcome. His wife would have been safe. The car would have been destroyed. Exactly the same outcome, but our perspective is what shapes everything. And I think that's like a central kind of foundation of this book, that everything is based on our perception of events. But then like he goes on to talk about the self and identifying with the mind. And I think that the chapter, you know, you can loosely term it just who am I? And he strips back all the layers. And again, he does it as an engineer. He does it as like a scientist. So he kind of says, okay, so you are thought. You know, they say, I think, therefore I am, Nietzsche or whoever. Descartes.
Yes.
All the same, let's be honest. Come on, I'm enjoying my prime over here. Leave me alone. So he goes, okay, I think, therefore I am. He goes, that statement I believe is false because, okay, if I tell you to think about something, if you stop thinking, you don't cease to exist. And then he goes, okay, so you're not the thinker. You're not this, you're not that, and you're not everything else in existence. So what are you? And he kind of takes you back, and I don't think he really gives his own interpretation, but he doesn't force any sort of agenda. He just kind of very gently takes you on this journey of thought, which I really, really liked.
That was very good. So that's part of his 6 grand illusions, right? So he says, in order to be able to basically not have an expectation of life or an understanding of life that would take your happiness away, there's 6 illusions you need to let go of. And one was about self, who I am. And he says a lot of our basically unhappiness comes from the fact that we have a wrong identification. Like sometimes we identify with our wealth. So once our wealth goes, we become unhappy. We feel like we've lost it. With our with different things, and even with our physical form. In that chapter, he goes quite deep, which is really nice. I think that was a very good chapter. The one about thought, like we think that our thoughts are true or are us. That's another really nice chapter. He goes into basically what is our thoughts, and he says it's just like your brain trying to, figure things out. Or it basically, I think his approach in the thought chapter is like, he says, don't be a slave of your mind or brain. It's a tool you have, and you can tweak it to get better results out of it. So it's as if you deal with your brain in a certain way, it'll keep giving you these negative thoughts, which will bring your life down. But you can tweak it a little bit to give you different type of thoughts. Or even when it gives you negative thoughts, how do you deal with it? Do you accept it or not? So as part of these grand illusions that we need to let go in order to be happy, he mentions the self, the thought. Another very interesting one was the idea of control. He says we need to let go of this idea that we can control life. And for example, one of the things that examples he gives is his own child, right? He says after the child passed away, he kept having these thoughts that, okay, you should have taken him to another place. You should have maybe another hospital. This wouldn't have happened and all of that. And he said at some point you got to admit not everything is in our control.
Yeah.
And then he goes through this explanation of how many different elements contribute to one event happening. That's just impossible for any human being to be able to control that.
And even on that, he talks about the interconnectedness of all of us.
Yeah.
And I really like this notion where he was talking about how we are the kind of protagonists in our story, but actually we are a part of everybody else's story as well, and everyone has their own journey. So he gave an example of, for example, when you're at a coffee shop and you either go to the barista on the left or the right. He goes, if you go to the one on the left, then the person behind you will go to the person on the right, and then they could, for example, strike up a conversation, end up married with 7 kids and whatever. And that's a reality that can happen.
Yeah.
But it's like, had you gone on the right, it would have been a completely different story. But the fact is that we're so caught up in our own life and our own story and our own journey that we forget that everyone's is so interconnected.
Yeah.
And he talks about creating that bond and connection with existence, essentially, with everybody.
Yeah.
And having that kind of shared compassion and understanding, which I again, I think it was, for me, the journey of reading this book was interesting because he kind of gives you homework to do as well. So he tells you, for example, write a list of everything that makes you happy.
Yes, yeah.
And it's always really simple things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, a warm embrace of your child, for example, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like these things, they don't cost anything. They're not like extravagant things necessarily. They're everyday occurrences.
Yeah.
But how comes we're still not happy? Because you probably get that if you're a parent. Your kids will come and give you a hug and a kiss, and you put them to bed and whatever. But still, we find ourselves unhappy. So our goalposts need to be adjusted, and we need to really understand and reconcile all of this stuff.
Yeah.
There was one other thing I was going to mention, which was, I can't remember now.
Prime.
I was going to say the prime is getting to me. You know what? This is actually nicer than I thought it would be.
Is it? I really want to try that flavor too. What's your flavor?
Do you want to? Here you go.
Mine. Yeah.
Take. Oh, no, I don't care.
Okay. This is blue raspberry.
What have you got? Tropical punch.
Tropical punch.
James, do they have more flavors? Yeah. All right. Next podcast, we're doing new flavor. I prefer mine. Can I have mine back?
Yeah, sure.
Do you like this?
To me, they both were
Prime-tastic. Take your lid. Okay, nice brief interlude there. What was I saying? I
you were mentioning some deep points, but enough of you.
I lost. Okay, go on. You go.
So, just to be loyal to, because in the first half we're meant to explain, then give an overview of the book. So the model, one part of his model is there are 6 illusions you need to let go of, which we just gave some of them. And then another part is there are 7 blind spots you have to be careful of. These are basically some cognitive patterns or biases in the way we think that could lead to our happiness. For example, exaggeration. He gives examples that, like, if a couple of bad things happen to our life, we're like, oh, my life is doomed. So he mentions these cognitive things to be careful about as well. Cognitive biases, he calls them blind spots. So 6 illusions you need to get rid of, 7 blind spots, and then he mentions 5 truths or grand truths of life that you need to come in terms with. And so basically 6 illusions let go of, 7 blind spots be careful, and 5 truths accept. And the truths were basically things like death, change, I think the fact that now is the only thing we have, and lastly, like he ends the book with the idea of design, that there is some story to this life. It's not a stupid random event. So yeah.
All right, I think that's enough. I would encourage anyone that's listening to this, if you haven't read or listened to the book, it's worth it. It's...
Love as well was change, love, death, and grand design, and the fact that now is all we have. Sorry, these were the 5 truths.
That's fine. Interrupt me all you like.
Yeah. Sorry, you were going. You were saying. What were you saying?
I don't know.
You were saying that.
No, I was.
Yeah.
I was saying that anyone who has not read the book, I personally would recommend reading it, because I think it's a really well written book, and it provides you some really good food for thought. And I think, like we said, because it's based on like his lived experience, it's something that it's almost difficult to negate. Like you have to say, okay, fine, it works for him, therefore it can work. So give it a go. Why not?
Yeah.
Should we get to our ratings?
Let's get to our ratings.
So readability.
Readability. I would give 8.
8.
Yes.
Yeah, 8.5. I think
8.5 as well.
Yeah.
8.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we just match each? Okay. What's the next one?
Practicality. 8.
Yeah, I'm going 8. This is just going to be the same. Okay. And depth of insight.
Depth. 8.
Yeah. All right. Same scores for once.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Good. I mean, good ratings overall.
Yeah, I definitely recommend this book to people. I think it's a good read for 2 reasons. One is it's real. The most precious thing, I think, in my view, in the world is real stories of people. Yeah. And this is a person who shares his own real journey. That's, I think, very precious. And another thing is that he re-articulates so many things, although there are original things in the book as well that he came up with, but also some of the other things he says which have been there, he articulates it in a new way, which for some people who may not be enjoying, for example, I don't know, books about spirituality or happiness, they find the language weird, or especially I'm thinking about like business-minded people, tech people, or very, serious people. I think this is a very good articulation of those truths for that audience. Yeah. I even had a few of our friends in mind. I was like, one of our mutual friends. Yeah. I was like, this book would be very good for that type of mind. Yeah. So I think I highly recommend the book. Yeah, definitely.
For me, so I mentioned as well, I think it's a good read. But one of the things that I've only seen ever explored in one other book, I'm sure there are many books on the topic of death, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep. That book, he had the last chapter, he talks about death. And I found it really refreshing, because often when it comes to these things, it's always about life. Yeah. Even happiness is about life. But even Mo Gawdat, he really, obviously, because it's the final chapter 15, I think he talks about his son's death and his way of coming to terms with it and coping, and he compares it to like a video game, and how his son took a shortcut basically to the finish, and they used to play video games together. I don't want to be honest, I'm not going to say anymore.
That chapter, there were a few chapters they deserve 10 in depth.
Yeah. So
that one was amazing.
That chapter was brilliant, and it was so. The thing is, sometimes the content can be very dense, and so it becomes difficult to listen to. This was like, because it was storytelling at its best.
He was really good.
Plus, there was so much depth of insight.
Yeah.
As you say, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
I might listen to that chapter again very soon, because
and it's good that we didn't talk about it, because I think it's very good for people to get a fresh encounter with that chapter. 100%. That chapter deserves 10, even in readability. The chapter on control, that was very deep too. 10 out of 10.
So for the second half, the epilogue. Do we call it the epilogue? We can. It's now the epilogue. So there's loads of different things. I want to start with. So I had a conversation with one of our mutual friends about this hypothesis of expectation versus experience. And what he kind of came back with, which I think is interesting and fair, is that, because for me, my approach generally is I have very low expectations so that I'm not disappointed.
Yeah.
But he was saying that, okay, that's fine, but at some level, there is a base level of expectation. Do you know what I mean? Like with any circumstance, any situation, like right now, I don't know if this podcast is going to go, well, I have no expectations of it, so it's fine. I can't be disappointed with the outcome because I don't expect it to be the world's best podcast episode. But at the same time, I don't expect you to throw your prime drink all over my face. If I did that, that would be below my expectations, even though I have no expectations. Yeah. So he was basically saying that at some level, we always have a base level of expectations. So how do we overcome that in situations where you expect very common decency, but you don't get it? Naturally, you're going to be frustrated or unhappy if we accept the premise of this equation. Or do you not accept the premise of the equation in the first place?
Okay. I think the premise needs work, but not because of this reason.
Okay.
We'll get to it. And this is not a good objection.
Yeah.
This objection
I told him that, but he didn't listen.
This objection is basically saying that I find it hard not to have expectations.
Yeah.
Right? So he would say, okay, I've got these 5 things for you to go on for, even in this podcast, if I throw this at you, yes, you may say, I expected that. I'm always like, why did you expect that? Or now this life learned you that sometimes people are idiots. That's something you learn and you accept. In life, I'm going to face idiots. And that's really true. And one of the things that sometimes people need to go to therapy to sort out is that a lot of us grow up thinking everyone's nice, especially if you're from like a family in which people are nice, and then suddenly you reach a very like not decent person, and that can really shatter someone's worldview. Why did this person do to me? I never intended any harm to them. Which means that a lot of people may have a worldview that, you're right, comes with certain base expectations, but life gets those away from you. So no, it is true that we can have a place where we have no expectation, but that's not an easy thing. And that's what I wanted to say is what the objection to this is. One of the objections is that getting to a place where you're fully without expectation is not as easy as reading a book will get us there. That is really some journey, right? And it's not just a cognitive thing. It's not like you can learn certain things and get there. That will be a result of a lot of journeying. No, we can talk about it maybe more. So that objection I don't accept it. I would accept it so far as saying, yes, it's hard. We always come with expectations sometimes, so we need to keep getting rid of them. The objection I have with the formula is this, that even if you don't have expectation, doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to not being unhappy, but that could take you to a state of boredom after a while. Although even that is massive, huge. A lot of people, if they get there, would be so happy, right? But let's say I don't expect anything from life, so there would be nothing that goes against my expectation, and it wouldn't make me unhappy. Fair enough. But then after a certain time, I may start questioning what is the point of life. It takes you from depression to nihilism if something else is not there too. So that's why I think the formula is not complete. It solves a lot of the reasons why we're unhappy, but it may push us to a deeper problem, which is, if you think about it, the journey a lot of people go through. I mean, this is an interesting time to talk about it. One of the things that happened in more developed countries, people were starting getting wealthy. A lot of people went through Mo Gawdat's journey. What's the journey? Gain material wealth, you'll be happy. You get there, oh, it wasn't happy, right? And they very soon realized that this idea that if I expect a good life and control to get there doesn't lead to happiness. So then they're like, okay, let me try another thing. They go to level 2. Let me accept everything and really have no expectations. And that really takes you from that depression out. You go into a different level of life, but even that at a certain point will have a ceiling. Although I'm saying for a person to reach that ceiling, it's going to take so long. So they're going to be happy for a long time.
Yeah.
But once they reach that ceiling, it's going to be a worse pain than the one they started first, because there's another thing, there's another level above that. Does it make sense what I'm saying or no? I'm not sure if I'm articulating it well.
I want to hit level 3, so keep going.
No, because I want to first make sure, did I make this clear or not?
No, I get you. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Well, level 3 is human beings need to, they can't not grow.
You said they can't.
They can't. Human beings can't not grow. They keep growing through material wealth, reach a ceiling, then they come out, they're like, okay, let me grow in acceptance. Let me grow in, but even that, will you realize, okay, it's a small world. In the sense that, okay, let's say you have no expectations. 10 years that nothing really went beyond your expectation. At some point, you're going to ask yourself, what's the point of all of this? So that's why the last chapter is a door that can help for this answer, the chapter about design. But I would say most of the formula is there. That at some point, you need to realize, what am I doing? Okay, let's say nothing is going against my expectation. But what is all of this? What's the point of it?
So if we take the equation and we're in maths class right now, would you add like a purpose of life into that equation somewhere? Or like, what, as in, so again, let's take it because he's approached it from like a, equation basis.
Yeah.
What's your equation for happiness?
Oh, I don't want to get there, because that would be a lot of like, what is it called? I want to keep those for other books.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean?
You got to listen to another 7 episodes to get there, right?
Yeah. No, because I don't want to turn this into like a thing about my ideas.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to use the book as a basis. Okay, I'm saying this idea of let's accept life and events can only get you a few years. Although it's a great thing, but it needs some certain supplements next to it. Another thing, for example, that idea of don't be in the past, don't be in the future, trying to live in the moment.
Yeah.
That's only going to work so long, for some time. At some point, you're like, why? What's keeping me in present? This is a very important question. One of the reasons that people find it even very difficult to stay like not wander in the past or like keep thinking about the future is that I need something to hold me in the present moment, right? So what is that? What can hold me now? And not want to go against life, because if life is almost decent, there's no chronic illness, there's no pain, there's I don't know, like massive problem I'm dealing with, I can stay in the present moment for some time. But let's say my child gets an illness, I get an illness, let's say I get what should make me and even if someone says no, accept it, this is what life is. You had expectation to be healthy, you had expectation to have a child, let go of that expectation. I say, okay, I let go of that expectation, so I'm not against life, but I'm not pro-life either. Like, they letting go of your expectation, you're like, okay, I don't hate life, but who should say I like it? I don't like it either. I don't hate it, but I don't like it. And that's not a good place to be. It's a good place from hating life, but what should make me want it? What should, make me feel like, oh, this is a gift. Life is a gift, And not everyone can like write a book for 1 million people to read to get a purpose out of it like that. Many people's life is very ordinary. So what is the solution for an ordinary person's life in a country where they're struggling to make ends meet? They're dealing with an illness. Okay, this is what life is. Fair enough. I'm not going to fight it, but I'm not up for it, someone may say. So that's when you realize, okay, I need something more. I need something that ties me to the present moment. And I think a lot of it has to do with that last chapter of the book, which what is all of this about? What is the story here?
The other thing I wanted to discuss, like I mentioned, this book talks about death, almost, as I said, refreshingly, because he's very candid about his own experience and his life, and going through the entire stages of grief almost, but then coming out of the other side, like when when they contemplated, for example, suing the doctors,
Yeah.
his wife said to him in a very sobering moment, will it bring Ali back?
Mm.
And then at that point he realized, no, it's futile.
Yeah.
Because they might get some money and they might get some, they're vindicated, but he's like, all we want is our son back and we can't have that. So I think, leading on from last episode, we talked about trauma and the body keeps the score. And it was, I think trauma, based on the conversation in that book, trauma is a very central part of life. For a lot of people, it's just a daily reality. So when it comes to death in particular, although it's the one inevitability that we have in existence, or in life, there is death. But how do you think we begin to come to terms with that? And do you think it's possible to be happy when experiencing death, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think he actually I'm trying to keep anchoring my replies in the book. I think he actually did a good job.
I think this is the part where you can.
But I feel like he did a good job of talking about that.
Yeah.
That death is not the opposite of life. I think that's a beautiful point he made. Death is not the end of life. It says death is the end of the physical form. And I think he did a very good job of explaining that. And for example, the Islamic tradition, there's that sentence that you don't die, you experience death. So death is not the end of you. Death is one thing that you go through. It's part of the journey. You taste it. It's this idea that as long as death is the end of life, it's going to be this scary thing that you want to push it away, which we're doing right now in the culture. No one wants to talk about it. Even I've seen, which really breaks my heart, because life naturally is designed in this physical form in such way that after you reach a certain age, the thought of death comes to your mind because it's naturally where you're going, And I've seen people push it away. Like if, for example, they see mom or grandma is talking about, they're like, no, don't talk about it. As if they think that's a good thing. No, that person's going to die. I'm going to die. And we never know, maybe we die even sooner than that person. So the idea that we push it away as if it's a taboo thing, Mo is saying that it's because of the wrong perception we have of death. We think death is the end of us. So we've built all of our happiness on the foundation that can be achieved in this physical form, in this 50, 60, 21 years in the case of his son, time that we're here. And so let's not talk about bad afterwards. He says, no, look at your story in a bigger frame. This bit in this physical form is just part of the story. And he gives actually good, interesting arguments for that. He doesn't come at it from a religious angle. He comes at it from his own engineering mind. So I think that's important to, once you look at your experience, not as this limited 50, 60 years, but as a longer thing, then death is just one step in this journey. He gives example of, imagine if someone, while you're in the womb of your mother, everything is given to you without any delay. Instant gratification is in the womb of the mother, right? The belly of the mother. Just imagine someone's telling you you're going to die from this and go out. So what? No, I'm happy here. But that's how this life starts. So he gives this example that dying from this physical form is also another transition, which we may hate it and then realize that, actually was the best thing that could have happened to us. So I think, this is my own personal belief, which we can talk about later on. I think death is one of the most beautiful things most of us will experience.
Is that Descartes as well?
No, that's Descartes.
Wow. Is there anything else? I'm trying to think. We've got about 10 minutes or so left.
Where should we go? There's a few places we could go.
You tell me. Where do you want to go?
Control, I think, was a very good one.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. You seem to...
Control.
Let me ask you one thing. I think I know a lot of people that read these kind of books, but we're getting to the point almost even on this podcast of prolifically reading these books about happiness and life and lifestyle and being productive and whatever else.
Yeah.
But okay, you've done a 10K run, an 11K run, whatever. We head in the right direction, but it still feels generally speaking, with these kind of things, you read something, it has that limited impact, and then we kind of carry on.
Okay.
But we're constantly pursuing. I mean, happiness is one of those things, like you said, and even for me, whenever I think about my life plan or whatever else, I don't know what I want to do in 5 years, but I know I just want to be happy. So wherever I find that life is interesting and the opportunities are right and give me a sense of fulfillment and purpose, that's what I pursue. But for a lot of people, and I know people that prolifically read these kind of books, but seem entirely miserable.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
I think that's such a brilliant question because it gives me the opportunity to tie in a few things we discussed in one.
That's why I asked it.
I know.
I got inside your brain.
Yeah. No wonder Prime really.
Prime is primed me. This, by the way, this flavor is really good. Next time, James, please.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So there's a few elements in your question. First of all, how can we get to happiness if these books are not helping? What's going on? All of that. There's a level of up moment after you read it, or a high, and then it goes down. I think one of the things that a person will realize is that control thing I said is so important, that if you take that chapter to its full conclusion, you realize that you really can't solve for happy. Because as long as you want to solve for happy, that means at least my happiness is under my control. Which he may say, yes, everything else is not. External things are not under my control. My internal world is in my control, right? And so that's maybe what he'll say. He'll say, yes, control of external things, I don't accept it. But internal world, but at some point, every person will realize that even my internal world is not under my control. And that may come a little bit later on in their journey of spirituality or all of this. But at some point, no, it seems like, nope. Even internal world was not under my control. And that's where the whole new way of living starts for the person. And that's why also another reason why I said more is needed. Just removing expectation is not enough. In fact, even removing expectation is not that easy. Like, one of the things that a lot of people have realized the hard way is that even if we know what we need to do, that doesn't mean we can do it. Let's say I realize, okay, in order to be happy, I don't need to have expectations. Okay, how can I remove my expectations? It's not as easy. A lot of the therapies actually started hitting dead ends because that's one of the things they realized. A lot of cognitive therapies, they started really optimistically that, we realize the reason this person is not happy is they've got these 3 wrong cognitive patterns, and we tell them and then they'll be happy. There's no telling, it doesn't do anything. How can it change you? So at some point, it's not about having more cognitive information. It's about something else, completely something else. Knowledge doesn't, this type of knowledge, this type of propositional knowledge doesn't lead to our happiness. So what are these highs we experience after reading in this book? And why do I still recommend a book like this? Because what is precious about this book is Mo's journey. The best thing that can help us, as long as we get, one of the best things that can help us is being next to someone or hearing from someone who's gone through a journey. They've achieved some real, not propositional knowledge, but like embodied knowledge of a truth. They may not even know how to articulate it. Like if you ask Mo, what's the formula for your happiness? He may give you this book, but it may not be this. This is what he came up with, but that may not be why he's happy. But listening to his journey actually helps. So that's why I tell people, read these type of books. It's good. And I actually, even me, it gave me some energy. Like I've been going through a very difficult time recently, and sometimes just listening to this was actually nice. So it's good, but ultimately it requires way beyond that. And it goes back to, at some point, becoming, having an intimate relationship with the ground of being, with the source of reality, with whatever he says created that grand design, with whatever life itself is. That is the only way to be happy. And you realize happiness is a gift that comes from life. We can't make it come. Although we can take a lot of steps to be less unhappy, to not be depressed, which there's so much we can do, but to go that highest level, to that just really receiving every moment as a gift, that can come from life itself. It requires a certain way of interacting with life. Falling in love basically, and realizing life itself or the source behind it is in love with us. There's no other, I think, solution. I said this in 2023. Let's see when will the world accept.
I think it's interesting. Like you said, we don't want to spoil too much of the book because there are some really profound chapters in there. But I think he almost presents the grand designer, that concept, in a similar way, where it's like you can call it what you want, you can imagine it how you want, but for him, and it's almost like the most controversial part of the book, if you can call it that, because up until that he's just talking about things that are realities for everyone, like being dissatisfied in life and whatever else. But then for him, what gave meaning to everything was that understanding of a grand designer, which he calls God, but others might call something else or might refuse to believe. But I think it's difficult because even, I mean, on the way home from the last podcast, we were talking about trauma, and the second half of the podcast, you remember, was quite heavy.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was quite a bleak outlook.
Yeah.
And then you said something. I'll ask you to repeat it on the podcast because I think it's relevant and it makes sense here. But what were you saying essentially about people's, when they've had trauma, especially in early parts of life, and they haven't had the support from their parents or their family, or they felt neglected or whatever? You made an interesting point that was more, I guess, grand designer / God-centric in its outlook.
Yeah. I think, see, all of these books come down to the same thing. It's like everyone is through different ways, even if they don't know it, they're trying to say the same thing. All the trauma books, they're like, if life is difficult, you need to have some support. This one as well, it says, I needed to know there, at the end of the day, it seems like in all of these, we're trying to say, I need there to be a reality out there that would give me the love I want, that helps me be seen, that I can be in a relationship with, that makes the present moment worth it. And the problem, as Mo says it very beautifully, the idea of God has been so much abused by so many people, so many horrible things being done in the name of God, that puts people off easily. I totally get that. I hate what has been done in the name of God and religion and all of that nonsense. So putting all of that away, putting even all religions away for a second, I think we deep down as humanity know that we would love it if there was a reality out there who loved us and who could make us seen. And as long as that's not there, we're going to keep chasing that being seen, either through our parents, even when they're 65, even when they need our help. But like, Daddy, see me, I became a rich person. Or if not, then the world. Maybe if I have fans, they'll see me. Like, we're desperate for attention. And we're desperate for attention, desperate for being seen. Or another thing we know, like in the trauma book, we said trauma is not a bad event. Trauma is a bad event plus not getting the support. Well, where is that support going to come from? So I think ultimately the formula is this: being able to create, being able to be in a relationship with life or the source of it, that you feel loved. From that, you feel that love and attention coming. And that will finally, and that you're increasing in that love. Like there should even be growth in that. Yeah.
I got your equation for happiness in the end. You said you weren't going to give it.
The equation is this, actually, that it's you can never gain it. It will be a gift that you'll receive. Because if you want to take the lack of control all the way, which is a deep thing, I hope people listen to that chapter because he does a very good job of setting the discussion up. If people listen to that chapter on conclusion and push it even a little bit forward, then they'll reach now, okay, I can't even gain my own happiness. But it's very much a birthright, as he says.
I think this might be a good place to stop. What do you think?
I think so too. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more to say. I think we can, we
yeah.
discussed trying to keep these down to like an hour, but increasingly I'm finding that these discussions can just go on and on.
Yeah.
But let's try and stick to the format as much as possible.
Yeah.
So next episode's podcast.
Yeah.
Next episode's podcast. Does that make sense? next podcast.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Tolle? Tolle? Okay, well, we'll figure out how to pronounce his name. But that was a book. So what happened was you messaged me. We were discussing what to do next. You messaged me about 5 books.
Yeah.
That was on the list. And then a couple of days ago, I was with some guys and we were talking about something else. And then they were like, oh, why don't you do The Power of Now?
Yeah.
And I took that as like the universe sending me signal. Sign that this is what we should do. So we're going to be doing The Power of Now. I think, again, it's a very popular...
Does universe give signals to everyone who's done a marathon, or do you have like special thing going on?
Maybe after your 10K, you might get something. I can't promise.
I've already finished the 10K. It doesn't have to be in a race.
No, you have to get the medal.
Is it?
Yeah, it doesn't
They
count.
give medals for 10K?
You're going to get a medal and a t-shirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It doesn't count otherwise.
Yeah, of course.
Like, who knows you did a 10K? Well, Strava.
Yeah.
Doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, put it on the dog, and the dog was running, basically.
But yeah, so that's next podcast. Anything else? I don't know. What do we normally talk about at the end? That's it.
Nothing. I just say that beautiful line.
Oh, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So that's it. We're done. Everything is, okay. And... oh, my God. Okay.
It's not that difficult.
Yeah, this is not a book club. And remember, this is not a book club.
One more.
No, you should have no expectations. What did we talk about? Okay. And this is not a book club.
And remember.
Oh, okay. And remember, this is not a book club.
That was nice.
Yeah?
I like that one.
Very good.
7 out of 10.
Okay. I have no expectations of love from you. I'm happy.